While I was leaving for abroad, I bought my aged father a condo, a quiet place where he could live his last years in dignity. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was being a good daughter. Every brick of that building represented hope. Every corner held my dreams of giving him the peace he deserved after decades of sacrifice. The man who taught me to tie my shoes, who worked 3 jobs to keep food on our table, who never once complained when arthritis made his hands shake, he deserved better than the cramped apartment where the neighbors fought through paper-thin walls. But months later, I got a message that made my knees give way. The condo was gone. Sold. Not by a stranger. Not by a thief. By my own daughter. The child I carried for 9 months, the baby I nursed through countless sleepless nights, the little girl who used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms, she had become the storm that destroyed everything I'd built. My lawyer checked the documents, sighed, and said the words that still echo in my chest: she's a silly girl, and she'll pay for this the hard way. Silly? There was nothing silly about calculated betrayal. There was nothing innocent about forging signatures and stealing from your own grandfather. This wasn't a childish mistake. This was deliberate, cold, and merciless. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared at the rain sliding down my window and whispered, "How do you forgive your own blood for selling your father's peace?" The droplets traced paths down the glass like the tears I couldn't shed, each one carrying the weight of a trust so shattered that even God seemed to weep with me. How do you explain to the universe that the person you created, the one you would die for, just became the architect of your deepest pain? Before we go deeper into this nightmare that became my reality, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to Revenge Stories Journal, and comment where you're watching from. Because this story will break your heart before it heals it. And maybe, just maybe, it will remind you that even in our darkest moments, justice finds a way to breathe again. I raised my daughter alone after her father passed. The cancer took him slowly, painfully, leaving me with a 3-year-old and debts that felt like mountains. Every struggle I faced was for her: the long shifts at the diner where my feet bled in cheap shoes, the cold dinners because she ate first, the empty birthdays where I smiled through the ache of having no money for gifts. I told myself the sacrifices were worth it. I told myself love would be enough. When she turned 16, I worked double shifts to buy her a car. When she graduated, I sold my mother's jewelry to pay for her college applications. When she wanted designer clothes, I wore the same 3 outfits for 2 years. Every choice I made carved another piece from my soul and handed it to her on a silver platter. And she took it all: every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every moment I chose her happiness over my own, and she took it as if it was owed to her. My father watched it all unfold. He'd sit in his old recliner, the one with the torn armrest and faded fabric, and he'd shake his head. "You're spoiling that girl," he'd say softly. "Love without boundaries becomes entitlement." But I didn't listen. I thought love meant giving everything, even when everything included my own dignity. When my father's health began to fail, when the doctor's words hung in the air like a death sentence, I wanted to give him something stable. The man who raised me in a 1-bedroom apartment, who taught me that dignity wasn't about what you owned, but how you carried yourself. He deserved better than the assisted living facilities with their sterile walls and institutional smell. So I bought him a condo, nothing fancy, just peace and a roof he could call his own. 2 bedrooms, a small kitchen where he could make his morning coffee the way he liked it, and a window that faced east so he could watch the sunrise. He used to say, "This place feels like heaven, my child." Those words still echo in my mind, a bittersweet melody that plays on repeat in the quiet moments when grief threatens to drown me. The condo represented everything I'd ever wanted to give him: security, independence, dignity. I furnished it with his favorite things: the wooden chair he'd built with his own hands 40 years ago, the photo of my mother from their wedding day, the small television where he could watch his evening news. It wasn't about the money or the property value. It was about finally being able to say, "Dad, after everything you've given me, here's something back." Before I left for Europe, a work opportunity that felt like a lifeline after years of financial struggle, I handed her the spare key. My daughter, now 24, with her bright smile and confident voice. I thought it was trust. I thought I was including her in the family responsibility. "Just check on Grandpa once in a while," I said. "Make sure he's eating, that the heat is working, that he's not lonely." I didn't know it would become the weapon she'd use to betray me. That key, small and silver, innocent in her palm, it might as well have been a dagger aimed straight at our family's heart. Trust, I learned, is like glass. Once shattered, even the most careful reconstruction leaves scars that catch the light in all the wrong ways. The months in Europe passed slowly. I called my father every Sunday, and he sounded happy. Content. "The neighbors are nice," he'd say. "Mrs. Chin brings me soup sometimes. The mailman knows my name." These small details painted a picture of the peaceful life I'd wanted for him. I'd done something right, finally. After years of struggling and sacrificing, I'd given him dignity in his final years. My daughter's texts were sporadic but reassuring. "Grandpa's fine. Visited him yesterday. All good here, Mom." Short, efficient, the way young people communicate. I didn't think anything of it. I was working 16-hour days, trying to save every euro for my father's future care and my daughter's continued education. The irony burns now. I was working myself to exhaustion to secure their futures while she was already planning to steal it. It started with a phone call from my father's neighbor, Mr. Peterson, a retired teacher with kind eyes and a gentle voice. "Ma'am," he said, and I could hear the confusion in his tone, "there's a for sale sign outside your condo." "But your father, he's still living there. He seems as surprised as anyone." At first, I thought it was a mistake. Property management companies make errors all the time. Wrong addresses, mix-ups in paperwork. "I'll call the management company," I told Mr. Peterson. "Thank you for letting me know." But even as I spoke, something cold was spreading through my chest, an unnamed dread that made my hands shake as I ended the call. I called the management company first. "No, ma'am," the representative said. "Our records show the property was listed by the owner. Sale went through 2 weeks ago. New owners take possession next month." The words hit me like physical blows. Listed by the owner. But I was the owner. I was thousands of miles away. I had never authorized any sale. Then my lawyer checked the records. The property had already been sold. My name erased. My father's removed. My daughter's there, bold and confident, like she'd earned it. Like she'd spent her own blood and sweat and tears to make those mortgage payments. Like she'd worked those double shifts and eaten those cold dinners and sacrificed her own dreams to build something beautiful for someone she loved. The paperwork was neat, professional, legal in every way that mattered to the courts. Signatures that looked like mine but felt wrong in some indefinable way. Dates that aligned perfectly with when I was out of the country. A power of attorney I'd never signed, witnessed by people I'd never met. It was a masterpiece of deception, so carefully crafted that even I might have believed it if I didn't know the truth. Douglas, my lawyer, sighed and said, "She's a silly girl. She'll pay for this in the hard way." His voice carried the weight of someone who'd seen too many family betrayals, too many children who destroyed their own bloodlines for money. But his words felt inadequate, too simple for the magnitude of what had happened. I stared at the message. Silly girl? No, this wasn't silly. This was betrayal carved in ink. This was premeditation and planning and the cold calculation of someone who had looked her grandfather in the eye while orchestrating his homelessness. This was the death of every bedtime story I'd read her, every fevered night I'd sat beside her bed, every proud moment when she'd accomplished something beautiful. She had taken all of that love and twisted it into something unrecognizable. The sale price was $300,000. Not market value, she'd sold it below market to ensure a quick sale. My father's peace, his dignity, his final haven, liquidated for whatever quick cash she could grab. She'd valued his comfort at less than the cost of her last vacation. When I called her, she answered laughing, said she'd made a smart move and saved me the trouble of managing property. Her voice was bright, cheerful, the same tone she'd used as a child when presenting me with a crayon drawing. But now that sweetness felt poisonous, manufactured, designed to manipulate. I said quietly, "You sold it." My voice barely above a whisper because speaking louder might have released the scream building in my chest. The question hung in the air between us, separated by thousands of miles and a chasm of betrayal that felt even wider. She replied, "Yes, Mom. Grandpa's fine. You're overreacting again." Those words, overreacting again, burned through me like acid. She had used them every time she wanted to silence me. When I questioned her spending, when I worried about her choices, when I dared to suggest that perhaps her decisions weren't always perfect. Overreacting again had become her weapon of choice, designed to make me doubt my own instincts and swallow my concerns. But this time, the gaslighting felt different. This time, she wasn't just dismissing my feelings, she was rewriting reality itself. My father wasn't fine. He was about to be homeless because of her actions. I wasn't overreacting. I was responding to a legitimate crisis that she had created and was now trying to minimize. Those words revealed the depth of her manipulation. She didn't just steal the property, she was trying to steal my right to be angry about it. She wanted me to accept the betrayal quietly, to apologize for my own pain, to thank her for destroying the one thing I'd built for my father's comfort. But this time, I didn't argue. I recorded the call. Her tone, her arrogance, her laughter, all proof. The casual way she admitted to the sale, the dismissive way she treated my shock, the manipulative way she tried to make me question my own sanity. Because one day, truth would need a voice, and I wanted that voice to be her own words. Every word was evidence. Every laugh was testimony to her callousness. Every attempt to gaslight me became proof of her calculating nature. She thought she was talking to the same broken-down mother who had always backed down, always apologized, always made excuses for her behavior. She didn't realize she was talking to someone who had finally reached the end of her rope. Douglas started digging. 23 years of legal experience had taught him to follow paper trails like a bloodhound follows scent. The signatures didn't match. Mine had a slight tremor from years of repetitive work injuries. Hers was too smooth, too confident. The notary stamp was fake. The number didn't match any registered notary in the state. Even the buyer was suspicious, a man who thought she had full legal rights to sell property that had never belonged to her. We found transfer logs that showed the money going directly into her personal account. Falsified emails that she'd sent to the realtor claiming to represent me. A bank trail that led straight to her like breadcrumbs in a dark forest. My daughter had sold her grandfather's piece to fund her luxury lifestyle, and she'd left evidence of every step. The credit card statements told their own story. Designer handbags purchased the day after the sale closed. A vacation to the Bahamas booked within the week. Restaurant charges that exceeded my monthly grocery budget. She hadn't sold the condo out of financial desperation or family emergency. She'd sold it for luxuries, for wants disguised as needs, for the fleeting pleasure of living beyond her means. I stayed quiet, not out of fear, but precision. Quiet like a storm waiting to break. I built a folder titled Truth and filled it with evidence, every signature, every timestamp, every lie. Each document was another nail in the coffin of our relationship, another piece of proof that the daughter I'd raised had become someone I didn't recognize. The investigation revealed the scope of her deception. She'd been planning this for months, maybe longer. The fake power of attorney was dated 6 months before the sale. She'd researched real estate laws, consulted with unethical lawyers, created an entire false identity as my legal representative. This wasn't an impulsive decision made in a moment of weakness. This was a calculated campaign to steal from her own family. The most damning evidence was a text thread with her friends, recovered from phone records. Finally cashing in on the family property, she'd written, "Mom will never know until it's too late. Grandpa won't remember anyway." The casual cruelty of those words, the way she laughed about my father's declining memory, the complete absence of guilt or remorse, it revealed a person I'd never truly known despite raising her for 24 years. The next day, she called cheerful arrogant. The kind of confidence that comes from believing you've outsmarted everyone around you. Her voice bubbled with excitement, with the manic energy of someone who thought they'd pulled off the perfect crime. "Mom, you won't believe it. I sold the condo for 300 grand. The realtor said I was amazing." Amazing. She used that word like she'd accomplished something praiseworthy. Like she'd earned a medal instead of committed fraud. Like destroying her grandfather's home was worthy of celebration. The pride in her voice was perhaps the most painful part. This was my daughter, the child I'd taught to say please and thank you, celebrating the theft of her grandfather's dignity. She wasn't calling to confess or apologize. She was calling to boast. I whispered, "You're right, sweetheart. You are amazing. Check your bank account." My voice was steady, calm, almost conversational. I'd learned that the quieter I spoke, the more attention people paid. And I wanted her full attention for what came next. There was silence. Then panic. Then screams. The kind of primal fear that comes when reality crashes into delusion. The funds were frozen. The fraud report had gone through. Douglas had worked faster than she'd anticipated, filing papers while she was busy spending money that had never belonged to her. Her world began to collapse in real time. I could hear it through the phone, the desperate clicking of computer keys, the panicked breathing, the moment when arrogance transformed into terror. For years, she lived without consequences, protected by my love and my tendency to forgive. But love has limits and forgiveness has boundaries, and she'd finally crossed both. "Mom, what did you do?" she cried. The same voice that had called me overreactive now screamed my name like a lifeline. The daughter who had dismissed my concerns now desperately needed my help. The irony was suffocating. I said I didn't do anything. The truth did. And it was true. I hadn't fabricated evidence or lied to authorities. I'd simply presented the facts, that she'd forged documents, stolen property, and committed fraud against her own family. Truth has its own power, its own momentum, and once released, it's impossible to contain. For the first time, I heard fear in her voice, the kind of fear that comes when lies meet consequences. For 24 years, she'd lived in a world where charm could overcome accountability, where tears could erase mistakes, where being family meant automatic forgiveness. But the legal system doesn't care about your childhood memories or your mother's unconditional love. It cares about evidence and law and justice. The bank account freeze was just the beginning. The fraud investigation would take months, during which her assets would remain inaccessible. The credit cards funded by the stolen money would be canceled. The lifestyle built on her grandfather's sacrifice would crumble piece by piece, and she would have to watch it happen while knowing that every loss was self-inflicted. She tried to talk her way out. She blamed everyone, the lawyer, the buyer, even me. According to her version of events, I was an absent mother who had abandoned my responsibilities. The lawyer was corrupt for not warning her about the consequences. The buyer was stupid for not verifying her authority. Everyone was at fault except the person who had actually committed the crime. Her explanations grew more desperate and contradictory with each conversation. First, she claimed she'd misunderstood my intentions. Then she said I'd given her permission during a phone call she couldn't specifically recall. Then she insisted that as family, she had the right to make decisions about family property. Each lie revealed new depths of self-deception and entitlement. But when the fraud case reached the local papers, the truth became louder than her excuses. Local woman charged with elder fraud in family property case. The headline was small, buried on page 6, but it might as well have been written in fire across the sky. Her friends read it. Her coworkers read it. The neighbors who had watched her grow up read it and shook their heads in disappointment. She lost the car, repossessed when the fraudulent loan payments stopped. The house she'd been renting with stolen money, evicted when the rent checks bounced. The friends who used to praise her generosity, suddenly unavailable when she needed help. Success built on deception is like a house built on sand. It looks impressive until the tide comes in. And I didn't need revenge. Watching karma work was enough. Justice, I learned, isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's simply about truth being revealed, about consequences finding their natural target, about the universe restoring balance in its own mysterious way. The legal proceedings moved slowly but inevitably. Douglas explained each step with grim satisfaction: the asset recovery, the restitution orders, the criminal charges that would follow her for years. She would pay back every penny, with interest and penalties. She would perform community service. She would live with a criminal record that would affect her employment, her housing, her future in ways she was only beginning to understand. When my father passed weeks later, I placed his favorite wristwatch beside him and whispered, "Rest easy, Papa. Your peace is restored." The condo had been recovered, sold properly, and the proceeds used to pay for the funeral he deserved. He died knowing that justice had been served, that his dignity had been defended, that his daughter hadn't let his sacrifice be in vain. His death brought a kind of closure that I hadn't expected. The man who had worried about being a burden, who had apologized for needing care, who had tried to refuse my help because he didn't want to cost me money, he died surrounded by the love and respect he'd always deserved. The last weeks of his life were spent in a proper care facility, paid for with legally recovered funds, attended by professional staff who treated him with dignity. I used part of the recovered money to start a small care foundation for senior citizens, named it the Haven Home, after my father. The condo she destroyed became the reason others found shelter. 6 months later, we opened our doors to 12 elderly residents who had nowhere else to go. Their gratitude reminded me that pain, when channeled properly, can become purpose. The foundation operates on a simple principle: every elder deserves dignity, regardless of their family situation or financial status. We don't accept residents based on their ability to pay, we accept them based on their need for care and respect. My father's stolen peace became the foundation for peace for dozens of others. That's what justice really is: not payback, but purpose. Not revenge, but redemption. Not destroying the person who hurt you, but building something beautiful from the wreckage they left behind. My daughter's betrayal had taught me about the depths of human selfishness, but the foundation taught me about the heights of human compassion. And though she never apologized, I forgave her. Not because she deserved it, not because she asked for it, but because bitterness is just another kind of prison. I'd spent too many years in emotional prisons. The prison of poverty, the prison of single motherhood, the prison of endless sacrifice. I refuse to spend my remaining years in the prison of hatred. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean trusting again. It doesn't mean pretending the betrayal never happened. It means releasing the poison of anger before it destroys you from the inside. It means choosing peace over pain, healing over hatred, freedom over the chains of resentment. My daughter moved across the country after the legal proceedings ended. We haven't spoken in 2 years. Sometimes I wonder if she's learned anything from the consequences she faced. Sometimes I hope she's building a life based on honesty instead of deception. Sometimes I pray that somewhere, somehow, she's become the person I thought I was raising. But mostly, I focus on the present. The foundation grows each year. We've housed 43 elderly residents since opening. We've provided dignity to people who thought they'd been forgotten by their families and society. We've proven that sometimes the most beautiful flowers grow from the darkest soil. The pain of betrayal never fully disappears. It settles into your bones like an old injury that aches when the weather changes. But like all old injuries, you learn to live with it, to work around it, to find strength you didn't know you possessed. You learn that survival isn't just about enduring trauma, it's about transforming it into something meaningful. Every Sunday, I visit my father's grave. I bring fresh flowers and updates about the foundation. I tell him about the residents who remind me of him, the retired teacher who volunteers to help others with their paperwork, the former nurse who organizes medication schedules, the widowed carpenter who fixes broken furniture with the same gentle precision my father once showed. You would be proud, Papa, I whisper to the headstone. Your sacrifice wasn't wasted. Your dignity is living on in others. And I believe he hears me. I believe his peace is restored, not just in death, but in the lives his story continues to touch. Heavenly Father, bless every parent betrayed by their own child, and every child who has lost their way in greed. The pain of family betrayal cuts deeper than any other wound because it comes from the people we're supposed to trust most. It violates the sacred bond between parent and child, the assumption that blood means loyalty, the belief that love should provide protection from our own family members. Teach us to let truth speak louder than anger. In our pain, it's easy to want vengeance, to dream of destruction, to fantasize about making them suffer as we have suffered. But truth is more powerful than anger, more lasting than revenge, more healing than hatred. Truth builds while anger destroys. Truth heals while revenge perpetuates cycles of pain. And when betrayal tries to break us, remind us that peace, not revenge, is the final victory. Breaking someone who has broken you doesn't restore what was lost. It doesn't heal the wound or recover the trust or undo the damage. But finding peace in spite of betrayal, building something beautiful from the wreckage, choosing forgiveness over bitterness, that's victory that no one can take away. Let us find strength in our scars, wisdom in our wounds, and purpose in our pain. Let us remember that we are not defined by what was done to us, but by how we choose to respond. Let us build bridges instead of walls, create havens instead of prisons, offer hope instead of despair. Bless the children who have lost their way in greed and entitlement. Help them find their way back to integrity, back to the values they abandoned, back to the people they were meant to be. Sometimes the greatest punishment is living with the consequences of our choices. Sometimes the path to redemption begins with acknowledging the depth of our mistakes. Guide us all toward healing, not the kind that erases history, but the kind that transforms pain into purpose, trauma into strength, betrayal into deeper compassion for others who have suffered. Let our stories become lighthouses for others lost in similar storms. If you've ever been betrayed and still found strength to rise, like this video, your survival is not just personal, it's inspiration for others who wonder if they can survive their own betrayals. Your healing becomes hope for those still drowning in pain. Your story matters because someone, somewhere, needs to know that survival is possible. Subscribe to Revenge Stories Journal and comment where you're watching from because your story might help someone find their voice again. In sharing our pain, we discover we're not alone. In speaking our truth, we give others permission to speak theirs. In choosing healing over hatred, we prove that love is stronger than betrayal, that hope is more powerful than despair, that light always finds a way to shine through darkness.